Derik Queen from Maryland, who, again, there are people with some different opinions on where Queen is. Just give us I'll give you the brief overview. He is a big man who is an offensive force, an offensive hub, but there are defensive questions. How would you say that is like just a snapshot overview of Derik Queen?
Yeah, fair. Kind of like a bit of a positional weirdo, right? Like a little bit short for a center, definitely big for a four, very skilled, has some traits that I think suit him really well to the four, some that suit him really well to the five, but he's certainly a bit of a unique, hard to kind of compare prospect. I think that's definitely led to why he is as polarizing as he is, like you said.
Yeah, because he's the sort of guy that, like, okay, so he's this player that in college he's got this great footwork and he can do back to the basket stuff and he can pass, and then you go, but can he defend? Or maybe he can defend, but can he protect the rim? But I'm not sure. But then where does that fit? And obviously the immediate people are going to look, well, not people, the immediate idea is going to be, well, look at Domantas Sabonis, look at Jokic, look at Şengün, look at Naz Reid, look at these sort of players who work as offensive big men. Now, there's obviously a big range there. We're talking about multi-time MVPs versus backup big men. And that is a big sort of difference in that level of outcome. So I'll start with Derik's defense. Is there a chance that it can work? Can it be because you can obviously work with Jokic in defense, and he's improved a lot. And you can deal with it. Sabonis, sort of, but it's a different story. But then you get down to some other players and it becomes way more of an issue. Do you think the Queen's athleticism issues or maybe lack of vertical pop is going to cause an issue that's going to not allow him to be playable in big moments?
I don't think so. He certainly has defensive weaknesses, no doubt about that. And the main one of that to me is just his motor, right? Like he's going to have to convince teams that he wants to try and wants to fight on the defensive end, which is not something that I can really, comment on really definitively. And Queen does have issues as like a vertical defender. He can't really jump that high, but he has some real high level defensive strengths as well. His feet move really quick. He has like a pretty impressive catalog of perimeter defensive possessions against guards this year. His hands are super quick. He gets a lot of just steals by jumping in passing lanes or, deflecting loose handles. And I think the path for Queen, I mean, like you said, we even look at a guy like Alperen Şengün, who you mentioned, who was a pretty atrocious defender early on in his career. And now that he's on a team with a bunch of great defenders and he's improved a lot, and he's been a guy who, maybe is never going to be like an all NBA defender, but someone who can definitely be good. So Queen, well, I think he has real defensive limitations, and whatever his future team is going to need to be diligent with how they deploy him and how they build around him. I think there's absolutely context where he could be a positive defender, even if it's not, as much of a rock solid bet as, I don't know. I mentioned like a Klingon before. It's like you draft him, you expect him to be an impactful defender. Whereas Queen, it's like there's a pretty wide range. But I do think at the positive end, there is a real world where he becomes a solid to good defender.
So in my first mock draft, which is the way that I do this process, Ben, is I come in and I've done a bit of research and let's bang out my first lottery mock, and then we focus it in, and I get in and I watch and I read and I listen and I talk, and then we narrow it down. But initially I put him at number 14 going to the Spurs because, okay, defensive problems, right? He's got passing ability. Could Victor Wembanyama's defense offset that? Is he just solid enough to come in and work as a Montrezl Harrell type backup big man who just dominates second units as an offensive guy who helps with that passing and being that focal point there? Is he a guy that you need a Wembanyama level defender next to? Do you need an OG Anunoby perimeter type defender next to him? Like, how does that work in terms of his strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, I think honestly, you hit it on the head. I think the best kind of defender to pair with him is like a rangy 5-man, which obviously there's only so many of those in the league, but there's definitely more and more of them as we see this archetype become more popular and more, young, tall players grow up developing more perimeter defense and offense skills. The Wembanyama fit is just perfect. I absolutely love that idea. For a bit of a scaled down option, like I really would like him at 6 to Washington to play with Alex
Oh,
Sarr, who obviously is not Wembanyama, right? But he's another rangy, athletic defensive 5 who protects the rim and isn't the best scorer, but that's what Queen is going to bring. He's going to be an incredible scorer. He's going to pass. And I think that's kind of getting back to what I said before, right? Where certain teams are just going to have a tough time maximizing Queen on defense. But if he gets to the right team, and, you can kind of siphon his defensive role, right? It's, you can see in the playoffs, especially, like a lot of teams shrink the floor and switch a lot. And the strength and the physicality really matters. So I think there's a lot of ways that Queen can end up being a positive contributor on defense, even though I don't think it's like a guarantee or anything by any means.
I don't want to harp too much on needies, but I think the positives are there. We know he can pass. We know that his footwork is great. We know he can work offensively in terms of post moves and all that sort of stuff. Can he shoot?
Maybe, but also I don't really think it matters that much, to be perfectly honest, because I view Queen at his high end as a legitimate on-ball creator who can, score and who can really create advantages, score in the paint. Obviously, he's an elite finisher, elite scorer in the paint. His mid-range touch is really promising. I think there's an okay chance he shoots, honestly. Like, his mid-range touch is excellent. He's already shown his ability to hit pull-ups in that area. He started taking a few more threes at the end of the season. Like, Queen, part of why I think his shooting projection is promising is that I don't think he needs to be a great shooter to be a good offensive player, right? Like, even if he's just a player who you leave him open, he'll knock down catch and shoot threes. Obviously a very different archetype of player, but even I think about like a Arkansas Jalen Williams on the Thunder, who has some body type similarities and is not a dynamic shooter by any means. He wasn't in college, but he's someone who will knock down an open three if you leave it to him. And obviously Queen has the, far superior athleticism and handle and passing to capitalize on that. So if I had to bet on Queen's being a good shooter, I probably would bet against it. But I think it's totally possible that he ends up being a solid shooter, and even more possible that he ends up being an excellent player, even without the good jumper, because of all of his other great skills.